In the early hours of March 8, 2014, a Boeing 777 carrying 239 souls vanished from the face of the Earth. Not crashed, not hijacked in any conventional sense, simply gone. Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:41 a.m. bound for Beijing. It was supposed to be a routine red-eye flight, 6 hours in the air, landing at dawn. Instead, it became the greatest aviation mystery of our time. Think about this for a moment. In an age where your phone can be tracked within meters, where satellites photograph every inch of our planet, where radar systems monitor the skies 24/7, how does a 200-ton aircraft simply disappear? The last words from the cockpit came at 1:19 a.m. "Good night, Malaysian 370. The voice was calm, professional, nothing unusual. 2 minutes later, the plane's transponder went dark. The aircraft that had been clearly visible on radar screens suddenly wasn't there anymore, like someone had flipped a switch. But here's what makes your skin crawl. The plane didn't crash. It kept flying. For hours. In complete silence. What happened in that cockpit after 1:19 a.m.? Why did no one, not a single person among the 239 on board, make a distress call? These questions would torment investigators, families, and the world for years to come. Let me take you back to where it all began. To introduce you to the people who boarded that plane, never knowing they were about to become part of history's most baffling disappearance. March 7th, 2014. Kuala Lumpur International Airport was bustling with its usual late-night energy. Among the passengers checking in for MH370 were honeymooners, business people heading to meetings, students returning to university, ordinary people living ordinary lives. There was Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53, the captain with 18,000 flight hours under his belt. By all accounts, he was experienced, professional, well-liked. He had a flight simulator at home, not unusual for aviation enthusiasts. What was unusual was what investigators would later find on it. The first officer was Farik Abdul Hamid, 27 years old and engaged to be married. This was actually his last training flight on the Boeing 777 before full certification. His instructor would later describe him as textbook perfect that night. No signs of stress, no unusual behavior. Among the passengers were 20 employees from Freescale Semiconductor, a Texas-based technology company. This detail would later fuel countless conspiracy theories. Were they carrying sensitive technology, corporate secrets? We'll never know. There were artists returning from an exhibition, a young couple who just got married, children traveling with their parents. Each had a story. Each had people waiting for them in Beijing. The flight manifest showed citizens from 14 different nations, but the majority, 153 souls, were Chinese citizens. When news of the disappearance broke, Beijing Capital International Airport became a scene of unimaginable anguish. Here's something that still sends chills down my spine. Several passengers almost missed the flight. They were running late, rushing through the terminal. If only they'd been a few minutes later. If only they'd missed that flight. But they didn't. At 12:41 a.m., MH370 pushed back from the gate. The weather was clear. The aircraft was in perfect working order. It had just been inspected 10 days earlier. Everything was routine. The plane climbed steadily to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. For the first 40 minutes, everything proceeded exactly as planned. The crew checked in with air traffic control as they passed waypoints. Navigation lights blinked steadily in the darkness. Then came that final transmission. "Good night, Malaysian 370. What's haunting is how normal it sounded. Investigators would later analyze that audio hundreds of times. Was there stress in the voice? A hidden message? A cry for help? But no. It was perfectly, eerily ordinary. The plane was supposed to enter Vietnamese airspace next. Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control was waiting for MH370 to check in. They waited and waited. When a plane doesn't make contact, there's a protocol. Controllers try to reach them on emergency frequencies. They contact the airline. They alert other aircraft in the area. All of this takes time, precious time. By 1:38 a.m., Vietnamese controllers were concerned enough to contact Kuala Lumpur. Where is Malaysian 370? This is where the confusion began. Malaysian controllers thought the plane was in Vietnamese airspace. Vietnamese controllers insisted it never arrived. For crucial minutes, both sides assumed the other was tracking the aircraft. It wasn't until 2:15 a.m. that anyone realized the awful truth. MH370 had vanished from civilian radar 56 minutes earlier, and no one had noticed. But the plane hadn't crashed. This is the detail that transforms a tragedy into a mystery. Primary military radar, more powerful than civilian systems, had detected an unidentified aircraft making a sharp turn back across the Malaysian peninsula. This wasn't a gentle course correction. This was a deliberate, almost aggressive maneuver. The aircraft that had been flying northeast toward Beijing suddenly banked hard to the southwest. Think about what this means. Someone in that cockpit, someone with knowledge and skill, had deliberately changed course. They'd switched off the transponder, making the plane invisible to civilian tracking. They'd ignored all attempts at communication. But why? Military radar tracked this ghost flight as it crossed back over Malaysia. It flew directly over Penang, Captain Zahari's hometown. Some would later speculate this was a final goodbye. Others saw it as a mere coincidence. The unidentified aircraft then turned northwest, following established air corridors. Whoever was flying knew exactly what they were doing. They were threading the needle between national airspaces, avoiding areas where they might be intercepted. At 2:22 a.m., the plane disappeared from military radar 2. It had flown beyond their range, out over the vast Indian Ocean. For all intents and purposes, MH370 had ceased to exist. But here's where our story takes an even stranger turn. The plane might have been invisible, but it wasn't silent. Not entirely. Every hour, MH370's satellite communication system performed what's called a handshake, with a satellite orbiting high above the Indian Ocean. Think of it like your phone pinging a cell tower even when you're not making a call. These weren't messages. They contained no data about the plane's location, altitude, or condition. They were just digital hellos, proof that somewhere in the darkness, MH370 was still powered up and flying. The last of these handshakes came at 8:11 a.m. Then, nothing. By this time, the plane had been in the air for over 7 hours. Fuel calculations suggested it would have run dry around this time. Somewhere in the remote southern Indian Ocean, MH370 had finally come down. But where? The search area was mind-boggling. We're talking about millions of square miles of the most remote ocean on Earth, depths reaching 20,000 feet, underwater mountain ranges, trenches that have never been explored. Meanwhile, in Kuala Lumpur and Beijing, dawn was breaking on a nightmare. Families had gathered at Beijing Airport to meet their loved ones. The arrival board showed MH370 as delayed, then delayed again. Airport staff began herding families into a private area. Something was wrong. The first official statement came at 7:24 a.m. Malaysia Airlines announced they had lost contact with the aircraft. Lost contact, as if the plane might simply have a broken radio. But as hours turned into days, the terrible truth became clear. This wasn't a communication failure. This was something far worse. The search effort that followed was unprecedented. 26 countries contributed ships, planes, and satellites. The initial search area kept shifting as investigators tried to piece together the plane's final hours from those cryptic satellite handshakes. Have you ever tried to find something in your house when you can't remember where you put it? Now imagine that house is 3 million square miles of ocean, and what you're looking for might be 3 miles underwater. The human drama unfolding was heart-wrenching. In Beijing, families refused to believe their loved ones were gone without proof. They held on to hope with fierce determination. Maybe the plane had landed somewhere remote. Maybe passengers were being held. Maybe some family members quit their jobs to focus full-time on the search. They became aviation experts overnight, learning about satellite technology and ocean currents. They scrutinized every theory, every possible lead. One mother described how she still prepared her son's favorite meal every Sunday just in case he came home. Another family kept paying their daughter's phone bill for years, calling her number just to hear her voicemail. As days turned into weeks, the mystery deepened. How had no one on board managed to make a phone call? Modern planes have systems that can't simply be switched off. Even if all power was cut, backup systems should have kicked in, unless someone knew exactly which circuit breakers to pull. The investigation began to focus on those in the cockpit. Captain Zahari's flight simulator data showed he had practiced a route eerily similar to MH370's final path. But was this smoking gun evidence, or just a coincidence? Investigators discovered something that made their blood run cold. Zahari had plotted a course on his home simulator that ended in the remote southern Indian Ocean, the same area where MH370 was believed to have crashed. But here's what the media didn't tell you. Pilots often practice unusual routes on simulators. It's like a video game for aviation enthusiasts. Zahari had hundreds of saved routes. This was just one of them. Still, the timing was unsettling. The simulation was from just weeks before MH370 disappeared. Zahari's personal life came under microscope scrutiny. His marriage was struggling. He was reportedly upset about a political trial in Malaysia. Some painted him as a troubled man planning an elaborate murder-suicide, but those who knew him told a different story. Yes, he was going through difficulties. Who doesn't at 53? But he adored his job. He was planning to retire in a few years and had already bought land to build his dream home. The young first officer, Farik, faced scrutiny too. There were reports he'd once invited passengers into the cockpit during a flight, a violation of protocol. But on the night of MH370, he was being evaluated. It seems unlikely he'd attempt anything irregular with an instructor watching. Could someone else have taken control? The passenger manifest was examined with detective-like intensity. Those 20 Freescale employees caught attention. The company dealt with sensitive military technology. Were they targets? 2 passengers were traveling on stolen passports. When this news broke, terrorism seemed the obvious answer. But investigation revealed they were just Iranian men seeking asylum in Europe. The passport theft was about immigration, not aviation. Then there were the theories that ventured into darker territory. Some suggested MH370 was shot down by military forces after being mistaken for a threat. Others believed it was hijacked and landed at a secret location. One particularly haunting theory involved the cargo manifest. Along with passenger luggage, MH370 was carrying 487 pounds of lithium-ion batteries. These have been known to cause fires. Could a cargo fire have incapacitated everyone on board while the plane flew on autopilot? But this didn't explain the deliberate turn, or the disabled transponder, or the route that seemed carefully planned to avoid detection. As months passed, the surface search was called off. The focus shifted underwater. Ships equipped with sophisticated sonar began methodically scanning the ocean floor. They were looking for a debris field, a telltale scatter of wreckage that marks where a plane hit the water. What they found instead was an alien landscape of underwater volcanoes, trenches, and plains covered in sediment laid down over millions of years. They mapped areas of the ocean floor never before seen by human eyes. But no sign of MH370. The search zone was based on analysis of those satellite handshakes. Scientists had performed mathematical miracles to estimate possible flight paths from those simple digital pings. But what if their calculations were wrong? In July 2015, more than 500 days after MH370 vanished, a piece of aircraft debris washed up on Reunion Island in the western Indian Ocean. Aviation experts confirmed it. This was a flaperon from a Boeing 777 from MH370. Finally, physical proof the plane had crashed into the ocean. But instead of providing closure, it opened new questions. Ocean current modeling suggested the debris had drifted thousands of miles. But from where exactly? More pieces would wash ashore over the following years. A piece of wing in Mauritius, part of an engine cowling in South Africa, each fragment a clue, but together they still didn't reveal the crash site. Some relatives refused to accept these fragments as proof their loved ones were gone. They demanded to see the main wreckage. Until the plane was found, they would keep hoping. The official search would become the most expensive in aviation history, over $160 million spent. Advanced underwater drones scoured 46,000 square miles of seabed. They found shipwrecks from the 1800s. They discovered new underwater mountains. But Flight MH370 remained hidden. In January 2017, the governments of Malaysia, Australia, and China made the heartbreaking decision. The underwater search was suspended. Without new evidence pointing to a specific location, they were simply looking for a needle in a haystack the size of Europe. The announcement devastated families who had clung to hope that finding the plane would bring answers. How do you mourn without a body? How do you find closure without knowing why? But the search didn't truly end. A company called Ocean Infinity proposed a radical deal. They would search for MH370 at their own expense. Malaysia would only pay if they found the plane. No find, no fee. Using a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles, Ocean Infinity covered more ground in months than the previous search had in years. Their technology was cutting edge, their determination absolute. Yet even they came up empty. In May 2018, they too suspended operations. MH370 seemed destined to keep its secrets. But here's what haunts investigators. They know roughly where the plane must be. Those satellite handshakes define an arc along which the plane must have crashed. Ocean currents tell them where debris would have drifted from. The math is solid, so why can't they find it? Some experts believe MH370's pilot, whoever was in control at the end, performed a controlled ditching rather than letting the plane simply run out of fuel. Instead of a high-speed impact that would scatter debris, the plane might have landed on the water relatively intact before sinking. If true, MH370 could be sitting on the ocean floor largely in one piece, in an area already searched but somehow missed. The ocean is dark and full of shadows. Sonar can be fooled by underwater terrain. As years passed, independent investigators refused to give up. A community of amateur detectives, engineers, satellite experts, oceanographers collaborated online. They analyzed flight paths, ocean currents, and debris patterns with obsessive detail. One investigator spent years studying barnacles that had grown on recovered debris, hoping their species might reveal where in the ocean the pieces had drifted. Another used sophisticated drift modeling to propose new search areas. These weren't conspiracy theorists, but serious researchers, some with decades of experience. They found flaws in the official search strategy. They proposed new areas to explore. But without funding, their theories remained just that, theories. The human cost of this mystery can't be calculated. Families were torn between accepting their loss and maintaining hope. Some marriages crumbled under the strain. Others found strength in shared grief, forming support groups that became like extended families. Children who lost parents on MH370 grew up with questions no one could answer. Where is my mother? Why did my father leave? The absence of explanation became a wound that wouldn't heal. Mental health professionals spoke of ambiguous loss, grief complicated by uncertainty. How do you process a death when you don't know how, why, or even truly if it happened? Some families held funerals with empty coffins, others refused any ceremony, insisting their loved ones might still return. Years later, bedrooms remained untouched. Phones remained charged, just in case. The disappearance of MH370 exposed uncomfortable truths about our connected world. We assume planes are tracked constantly, but over remote oceans, they largely monitor themselves. We trust that in emergencies, someone will call for help. But what if they can't or won't? Aviation changed because of MH370. New tracking systems were mandated. Planes now report their positions more frequently. Black box recorders were redesigned to transmit longer. The industry learned from this tragedy, but the lesson came at an unbearable price. Yet conspiracy theories flourished in the absence of answers. Some claimed the plane was carrying sensitive cargo that powerful forces wanted to disappear. Others suggested passengers with valuable knowledge were targets. The wildest theories involved alien abduction or interdimensional portals. But the truth is likely far simpler and sadder. Human action, deliberate or desperate, took 239 lives and left the world with an unsolvable puzzle. Captain Zahari remains the most scrutinized figure. His deleted flight simulator files, his personal struggles, the flight path that required skilled flying, all point to involvement, but correlation isn't causation. The evidence is circumstantial, the motive unclear. Could it have been First Officer Farik? Statistically unlikely for such a young pilot on a check ride. A passenger? Possible, but they would need specialized knowledge to disable systems and fly the plane. A hijacking gone wrong? Then why fly until fuel exhaustion? Maybe we're looking at this wrong. Maybe the why matters less than the where. Finding MH370 won't bring back the dead, but it might bring peace to the living. The families deserve that much. Ocean technology improves every year. What was impossible to find in 2014 might be discoverable tomorrow. The ocean floor won't hide MH370 forever. One day, perhaps soon, a search vessel will detect an anomaly. Cameras will descend through miles of black water, and there it will be. When that day comes, and I believe it will come, we might finally learn what happened during those 7 silent hours. The flight recorders, protected in nearly indestructible cases, should still be readable. The cockpit voice recorder will only have the final 2 hours, but the flight data recorder will tell the whole story. Or will it? Even if we recover the plane, will we truly understand? Human motivation is complex. Desperation, determination, or derangement, the difference might be impossible to discern from data alone. There's one detail that stays with me. In those final hours, MH370 flew south into the empty ocean, toward Antarctica, toward nothing. If someone was in control, they were flying away from any possibility of landing, of survival, of being found. It's the loneliest journey I can imagine. Whether by choice or circumstance, someone guided that plane into oblivion. Below was only dark water. Above, only stars. And inside, 239 souls, whose stories ended in a mystery that may outlive us all. The families of MH370 don't have the luxury of forgetting. Every anniversary brings fresh pain. Every false lead brings hope and heartbreak. Every theory brings the possibility of answers that never come. They've become experts in grief, these families. They've learned to live with questions that have no answers. Some have found meaning in advocacy, pushing for better aircraft tracking and search protocols. Others have retreated into private sorrow. One father told reporters he dreams of his daughter often. In the dream, she explains everything, where the plane went, why it happened, that she didn't suffer. He wakes believing he finally knows the truth. Then reality crushes him again. The children who were on that flight haunt me most. They had no choice in boarding that plane. They trusted the adults to keep them safe. There were 2 infants on MH370. Their parents probably held them during takeoff, promising everything would be okay. We live in an age where we expect answers. Science can peer into black holes and decode DNA. Surely we think we can find a missing plane, but MH370 humbles us. It reminds us that for all our technology, the Earth still keeps secrets. Some say we should let MH370 rest. The ocean has claimed it. Perhaps that should be the end. But I don't think the human heart works that way. We're driven to understand, to solve, to know. It's what makes us human. And so the search continues unofficially. Satellite images are still analyzed by volunteers. Ocean current models are refined. New theories emerge. Someone somewhere is looking at a map right now wondering, what if we searched here? The mystery of MH370 has become larger than the tragedy itself. It represents our fear of the unknown, our need for closure, our refusal to accept that sometimes terrible things happen without reason or explanation. But perhaps there's another lesson here. Life is fragile. The people we love can vanish in an instant. The routines we trust can fail catastrophically. Maybe MH370's legacy should be that we hold our loved ones closer, that we don't take goodbye for granted. Those 239 people boarded a plane expecting to land in Beijing. They had plans for the next day, the next week, the next year. They had no idea they were about to become part of an enduring mystery. In the end, MH370 asks questions that go beyond aviation. How do we live with uncertainty? How do we grieve without closure? How do we accept that some mysteries may never be solved? I think about the last moments often. Was there panic, resignation? Did they know what was happening? Or did they simply fall asleep as the cabin pressure dropped, never knowing they would wake up in history books as the passengers of the ghost flight? Whatever happened in those dark hours over the Indian Ocean, 239 stories ended together. Parents who would never see their children grow up. Children who would never come home. Lovers separated forever. Friends who shared a final journey into the unknown. MH370 remains out there, somewhere in the vast deep. One day, technology or chance will reveal its resting place. When that happens, I hope it brings peace to those who have waited so long for answers. Until then, the ghost flight continues its journey in our collective memory, a reminder that in our modern world of GPS and satellites and constant connection, it's still possible to simply disappear. A reminder that the earth is vast, the oceans deep, and some mysteries endure. The next time you board a plane, perhaps you'll think of MH370. Perhaps you'll text someone you love. Perhaps you'll appreciate the ordinary miracle of taking off in one place and landing safely in another. Because that's what we expect. That's what should happen. That's what happened thousands of times on March 8th, 2014, to every flight except one. Somewhere tonight, the families of MH370 are still waiting, still hoping, still remembering. Their loved ones have been gone for years now, but grief doesn't follow a timeline. Hope doesn't expire. And somewhere tonight, beneath miles of water and years of searching, MH370 keeps its final secret, waiting to be found, waiting to finally tell its story. The mystery endures, the search for truth continues, and 239 souls remain missing, suspended forever between departure and arrival, in the longest flight that never landed. This is their story, incomplete, unresolved, unforgotten.